this computer go? Do we see the little record thingy?
Yes.
Okay, good, because for some reason it does not show up when I'm sharing my screen. Thank you.
Oh,
All right, starting again. All right, everyone. Welcome. This is the COVIdeo series from Food Co-op Initiative. Our topic today is In This Together with Kym Estis from Market 166, and we'll be with her in just a minute. I just get us through a little bit of housekeeping as you arrive. So this is a video call. If you can be on video, please do be. It just makes the whole thing more connecting and warm. If you can't, we understand, but you do need to mute. And we're asked folks that stay on mute unless you let us know in the chat that you'd like to, if you want to, we actually get to the point where, to be honest, people just wave, like in the picture, if they want to be called on, and then you can unmute, but please do wait to be called on. And if you'd just rather put your comments, questions in the chat, feel free to do that. This call's being recorded, so anything you say will be part of a video that will be public. Just keep that in mind. And for check-ins, we're always expecting way too many people for individual check-ins, so we just check in by co-op. I know so far, of course, we have Mad River Market here, Paso Food Co-op, hello Lydia. Mary Ellen is here from Village Co-op Market of Williamsville. Lois is here from Free Range Food Co-op. Peter's here from Androscoggin Food Co-op. Peggy from Detroit People's Food Co-op, good to see you guys. And Sue's here from Westchester Cooperative. Chris from Bushwick Food Co-op. Thanks for coming back for one that's a better fit for what you needed, Chris. Kathy's here from Purple Carrot. Michaela is here from Sola Food Co-op. Joy's here from Cedar Falls. Like I told you, they all come in at the last minute. And Jenna is here also from Market 166. I guess to support Kym and hear what she has to say. And I know we're expecting a few others as we go. Thank you guys for being here today. And when I click on the chat, there we go. So today's call, just remember, try and keep everything focused on what Kym is sharing with us. We have this one opportunity to hear about Kym and her co-op and what they're building. So as much as possible, keep the questions and the comments focused on what she can share with us and what she has shared with us. Please do use the chat to ask questions, to put up comments. Peers often will say, like, maybe, Kym mentioned, and then you can use blank, and someone's like, well, where would you get that? And someone else will drop in the comments, oh, we use that, here it is. Like, feel free to use the chat, any old way to communicate. If you throw in a question there, I will wait till an appropriate moment, and I will ask Kym if she's ready to take a question. So I will handle that. If you want to actually unmute and ask a question, not everyone knows how to use Zoom's function for waving, and I actually just really prefer that you visually wave. I'll be watching you. So if you want to unmute and talk, just wave, and Kym and I will decide if it's time for us to take the question. Great. So now, there you go. Today's speaker is Kym Estis, as I said, from Market 166. They are a startup food co-op. They're in stage 1. They're just outside of sort of southwest of Metro Atlanta. And although they're in the early stages, they're doing some incredible work, networking with their community organizing. And I'd have to say, don't miss their marketing. It's really good for as early as long as they are. But Kym's here today to talk to us specifically about, in this moment with COVID-19 and this crisis, Kym reached out to me and said, we're having all these great calls, this great conversation about how do you keep ownership growth going? Should we still do an owner loan campaign? Like, how do we keep asking people to participate in the co-op? And that's all really important. But in the middle of a crisis, it's important that we show the co-op is more than something that asks of them, that we stop and connect with them and show them the co-op is there for them. So this is about Kym's perspective on that today and how she's manifesting that through a project at her food co-op that I know some others of you, if Dorchester Food Co-op's on here, a few others are also now implementing. But Kym has done this before. She's experienced at it, and she is going to lead us through how to do it, because I know some of you, when you've heard her talk about it, have said, oh my God, that's so much work. And Kym has got some tips for you on how to make it manageable. So I'm going to turn it over to Kym and stop sharing my screen. Thanks for being here, Kym. Oh, you're muted again.
Here I am. Okay, yeah, thank you. I was trying to be so quiet while you were talking. So thanks for being here. I'm especially glad that Jenna's here, because I know she's got a busy schedule. Jenna is our board president. So hi, Jenna. Good to see you from down the street. And so I want to tell you a little bit about sort of us and me, and to put some context behind this. And then I do have a presentation. We might go into that, but I really wanted to just give you a chance to walk through this journey that we're on and also introduce it in the context of what I've done before. So my name is Kym Estis, and I'm a member, but not a board member of Market 166. And I too have been impressed by the marketing that they've done. Before I was a member, I saw the social media and I saw the outreach. But when you think about that, I didn't know any of the people really involved with it. I just knew it as sort of a tertiary thing. And it sounded like a great concept, and I'm happy to join, but there wasn't a personal relationship there. It was just because I believed in the concept. So I was relatively new to the community. I just moved in. I'd heard about it a couple of times, and then I think that may be where a lot of members start, where maybe they're not new to the community, but they've heard about it, and maybe they hear from a peer or they hear from someone who's actually very involved. But either way, they may not, obviously, because we're startups, have a co-op experience. And so recognizing that, when I became a member, and also having spoken with Jenna and the board members a few times about what they're doing and understanding it a little bit better, it seemed like it would fall right in line with some of the things that I'd done as a fundraiser for the last 15 or 20 years, 18 years in fundraising. And in fundraising, just like fundraising, which is what co-ops do, which is you're building people together and bringing them into a community of people that share a common vision or goal of food availability, affordability, accessibility, and getting to those things and raising friends often requires more of a personal touch. So I, in thinking about that, broached the idea with Market 166 that we think about our fundraising, and particularly because we were entering the second year of boosting our membership, the second year of wanting to have a strategic plan. We're getting closer and closer to kind of being real and wanting people to see us as real. And one way to do that is to be real people and talk to real people who have already signed on, and who may also not need to be asked for anything, but need to be asked, how can we help you? So you have signed on to help us, to contribute to us, to be a part of this. And what we want to do is make sure that you know that we have some resources and things that we can provide to you. And one really great way of doing that is to make a phone call and give them the opportunity to answer the question, how are you doing? So if you're with me so far, I'm just curious, how many of you are either board members or volunteers? And we could do this by just like a physical show of hands, as Jacqueline was saying. How many of you are board members or volunteer, like lead volunteer people and responsible for outreach, and or a board member? Was that just pretty much everybody that I'm talking to? Perfect, okay. That's what I thought, and I just wanted to make sure of that, because you're the people who would be doing some of this, and I think that before you start doing it, you've really got to kind of understand the purpose and the reason and the value of it, okay? So with that, give me a second. I'm going to log on from the other computer to share my screen. So I'm just going to do that now. Oops. So I think it'll be really helpful for you to see not only what I'm saying, but also to have the visuals. And they happen to be on a computer that was not in the room with me. And they also happen to be a computer that's not online. Okay, so, so we'll just stop that right now. So one of the things that, that we've found to be very helpful is if you have an opportunity to prepare your board, and that's why I asked how many of you are the outreach coordinator, are that person or that person responsible for outreach. When you're doing that, you generally know that any idea that you come up with, if it's related to marketing or if it's related to anything, you're going to need to convince the whole team to come along with you, unless you want to just go on your own. We have about 120 members, and unless Jenna, our president, wanted to make 120 phone calls, it's certainly important to be able to bring everyone together in that decision to reach out and do the one-on-one membership. A few minutes ago, we talked about whether you do that on your own or how you choose who to call. and I think it was before everyone got online, that we talked a little bit about one way to do that is to make sure that that board member feels comfortable with the group of people that they've been assigned to or willing to call. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about how do we engage our board before we go outside and make any phone calls. So one of the things that we do is think about, and this comes from like the experience in fundraising as well as the experience in fundraising, is think about how can we divide this list logically so that everyone feels comfortable with it. I've done it a few different ways. One of them is by school districts, so that if your kids go to schools together or if you're in sort of the same neighborhoods, then you can divide it that way. Another way is your personal connection to someone. So that it feels like you're calling a friend and saying, how are you? Even with the co-op in mind and as a background to that conversation, your friend is receiving that call, it's comfortable for them, it's comfortable for you. And frankly, let me tell you, no one these days minds getting a phone call from someone that they're affiliated with, as in Market 166 or as in your co-op, and the person saying, hey, I'm just calling to ask you how you're doing. You're a part of this community. We are all in this together. And then you just stop and listen to that answer and understand where they're coming from so that they can give you an opportunity to help them. And the important thing about that is when you're helping them, you're also getting some insight. When they say, well, my mother came to live with me, or someone, outside of my normal family, my niece from New York, is escaping to Georgia because things are so crazy in New York, whatever, you get a better sense of that person. That's not just helpful for the conversation, that's helpful for your co-op to understand the types of people that you're serving in that conversation. So as you develop your list, keep that in mind, because if your list is developed around, for example, let's say I'm a senior, so I prefer to call the seniors, or I'm a Gen X, so I prefer to call the Gen X or the college students. Whatever group you decide to call, you probably will be able to generate some sort of internal empathy for them, as well as be able to for them to relate to you, because you will be bringing them this sort of offer of help. And there's nothing better than someone that you can trust giving you that offer of help. And so there's kind of this automatic trust bond there. The other thing that you're doing, again, is building community. So as you are reaching out into the community to talk to whichever member you're on the phone with, you're actually telling them a little bit about your Market 166's concern for the community that we are building. You're also mentioning to them, of course, in that conversation, that the goal for Market 166 and its volunteer group, you can call it the outreach committee or the board, our volunteer group is trying to reach every single member to let them know that A, we're here, B, we have resources that can help, and C, we want to know how we can help you and what we can send to you and keep you engaged in this community that you've decided to join. So that is kind of the basic way of engaging your board, is or your community, your outreach committee, is making sure that they understand, why would you do this? What is the value? And then the value comes around again, because we're not asking for anything, but a lot of times what happens there is sort of magical. First of all, you're making a personal connection. The second thing is, what happens after you tell the person, oh, wow, I've got a list here of different resources. I can put that in an email to you, and you make sure that you capture the correct email, and then you talk a little bit more about their mother-in-law visiting and how she has special diets, and you talk about, oh, this farmer, I'm going to star them in the email, might be able to help you, especially because they do that type of thing, or whatever it is, or here's some resources. At the end of that conversation, or maybe a few minutes after you've introduced these resources and mentioned that you would send them, you may get this very offer that says, well, what are you guys doing? And it's sort of this sort of open-ended question. What's going on with Market 166? Or what is going on with the Paso Co-op? Because the whole idea is, now you've asked me how I'm doing. What is the logical thing that a friend does after they've told you and you've helped them? Then they're curious, so how are you? How's Market 166 going? What's happening? Why can't I stop by yet? When are you gonna be? So and that side of it, this phone conversation becomes secondarily a little bit about an opportunity to say, well, they're doing great. We're looking at our strategic planning sessions right now. We're doing these outreach calls because we really want you to know that even without a brick and mortar, we've got the resources and we're still staying true to our mission. So you're getting and giving that information. A lot of it is giving them information and helping them to address what that member may need or how we may be a resource, how a co-op can be a resource. Food is top of mind for everyone. It'd be very unusual for them to say, I'm not thinking about what's going to be for dinner tonight or where my kids are going to have lunch tomorrow or where I can take my friend who insists on coming over or coming in town or my mother-in-law, whatever it is. It'd be very unusual for them to not be thinking about food at some level. But what they're thinking about too is that Market 166 or your co-op is a resource for that. And so there's some value to your call on both ends. Following? Yes. Nodding? Yes. So let that ride out, because that question of how are you doing is not really, it's still about them. It's still understanding that when you get a opportunity to, when you get an opportunity to ask those questions and then receive and incorporate those answers into the way you help, you also have the opportunity to provide that update that's aligned with the type of help they need. So when someone tells you they're a family of 5, they have 3 children, you can say, you know, we're thinking about doing more children's activities. Maybe you have some ideas about that. So it gives you an opportunity to grow your co-op and your understanding of your members a little bit as well. All of that is a part of the reasoning and that sort of preparing your board for going out and making these phone calls. I think it's really important to bring everybody along in that way, not just showing we're building community, but showing we need to get to know our community a little bit better. And this will give us some insight into how we can be a better community builder, how we can be a better, basically, service to our community. So I wanted to share that with you. The second part of it is now we're, you know, everybody's on board. How do we plan and what type of materials and things do we need to do in order to get our community ready? Sorry, I'm still trying to figure if I can open this up. How we can get people ready to go out and make those phone calls. So we have a little toolkit that I provided on a Google Drive for the board to take a look at, so that it gives them the types of background information that they need in order to make the call. So I'll tell you what's in our toolkit, and I'll be happy to share with you some sample scripts and things like that. But we'll do that. Like, actually, what you could do is you can just go ahead. If you want to get the sample scripts, just let me know. I'll be happy to share it with you.
How about I will actually just get them from Kym and send it out in the follow-up email to the whole session for everyone, because I think we're all going to want it.
Okay, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. So what I'm thinking about there is that the biggest thing that we have is not the script. The biggest thing that we have are the helper resources, right? So we have a list that Jenna prepared of various food-related resources in our community. So it's everything from where you can get a free meal or subsidized groceries or other types of farmers markets, as well as some of the farmers and seed providers and things like that we have in our community. So keeping in mind who the people are that have joined, and your premise for engaging them in the first place was about local food, was probably about healthy, locally sourced, accessible in terms of cost, accessible in terms of the convenience of getting that food. I think you can also add a lot of new places are providing food delivery now, which is another resource that you can add. So as you get to know or you probably already do know your community, but as you get to hear what's coming through the phone at you in terms of what that person needs, you may expand that list. And so this is what we have. We have a list of about 15 or 20 different links and resources that we will send as part of the follow-up email. And that's based on, it's not really based on what they've asked us. They just have said, oh yeah, I'd love to see your list, and then we give it to them. But the other thing that we do is we have a few talking points for the board member in this toolkit. And the talking points are specifically about what is Market 166 doing? Where are we in terms of members? Where are we in terms of a strategic plan? Where are we in terms of when will we, what else does it take in order to get to the end zone, if you will, of having a brick and mortar. Those are the types of questions that will come up in a conversation just naturally. It's almost if you're at the, imagine yourself to be at a picnic with people. What would they ask you about Market 166? Those are the types of talking points and bullets that we provide to the board so they can answer those types of questions and not feel uncomfortable or, well, and it's also has to be consistent with across the board. So we can't have, for example, Jenna saying one thing and our vice president saying something else and someone else on the board giving a different answer. We all want to be consistent in that answer and all have the same understanding of what may be important or top of mind for people to hear. Now, granted, someone may come up with some off the hand, you know, like, can you tell me, you know, how many people are on the Facebook page, which you really don't know. But there's a lot more opportunity to tell them about the things that you are doing and the things that you do know, just to be sure that you're giving them a little bit of a hint of what you're doing while sharing a lot of the value of what you're doing as well, especially when it feeds back into planned activities and things like that once the world calibrates a little bit from where we are now. I think that the other thing that we offer is, in addition to the resources, is just making sure that we have an opportunity for the board to practice. So I've offered myself as a practice person, so as a practice coach, like a board member or the outreach committee should establish somebody that can just answer the phone and be, you know, play the role of member in the community. And so that everybody gets a chance to do at least one practice phone call with someone. And the idea behind that is the person on the other end, A, is going to be a friendly face and friendly voice. And the other is that they can kind of help you tweak the message and say, oh, you know, we could say there, or you know what you should say if this question gets asked, or, you know, that was a little unclear. So there's an opportunity there for some peer-to-peer coaching, which would then help you get the message, your message out a little more fluently. And so I think that there's some value in that. So those are the kind of the three things. One of them is bringing your board together and kind of getting them circled around the idea of having this type of a phone tree, separating out the names so that everyone has sort of an equal burden in terms of making the phone calls. We also in the planning recognize the need to do some scheduling, because if you leave it open and say, give everyone a 30-day window, we know that board members you will not start those phone calls until day 27. And so you may as well give them a 10-day window with the goal that if they have a reasonable number of people to call, that 10 days, which is basically about 2 weekends, if you do it over 2 weekends, gives enough time, and particularly when most of the time there's going to be an answer on the other end of the phone. So the other thing that I want to mention about that is, as you do that scheduling, that too should be done in collaboration with the board. So you make sure that, for example, you're not trying to do it over, I know that this year's going to be wonky, but still Memorial Day weekend would be kind of like not the best time, perhaps on Memorial Day, to call people and things like that. Or, you know, there may be people who have just kind of general ideas of, you know, if there's a holiday coming up or religious observation, anything like that, you'd want to kind of circle around those things, but really trying to reach out to people while they're in this space, this very unique space of being most likely to answer the phone and being most available to have this conversation with you. So let me stop talking for a moment and ask if there are any questions that we can ask just about, kind of, we haven't yet gotten into a script, but just in terms of what are the values and what are we trying to do?
So we have a question from Jessica at Prairie Food Co-op. Do you think it needs to be board members making these calls, or can it be a secondary group of volunteers? Is that just as good? Keeping in mind they're further along, so they have like 1,000 owners.
Yeah, I do think that it can be a secondary group, and that was why initially I asked about the outreach committee. So if you can either convene an outreach committee of people that you trust, because this is really maybe the only voice that people have. And I think you also need to probably think about like 20 or 30 phone calls per person. So if you're going upwards of you know, if someone has to do 50 phone calls, that's a little daunting. It can be done. It can be done, but it, you know, allow 10 minutes max per call. It's a bit of time for that person. So I would say if you can get someone into the sort of 20 or so phone calls, even if it's some board members and some other volunteers, really board members are volunteers. I don't think, does anybody have a paid board? They're all volunteers, right? So,
Nope.
so your board members are your volunteers. I always call the board members sort of your premier, like top line VIP volunteers. You can almost ask a board member to do anything. Like, we want you to give money and give time and give us all the talent you have. And so Jenna's laughing, but she does all of that and then some. But I think that the whole idea of having an outreach committee of volunteers just speaks to the depth of commitment that people have to your co-op, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'd encourage it.
Awesome. We have a couple more. One is this something specific to do during COVID-19? Is this kind of a response to that, or do you think this should be done in general?
I think it should be done in general. The reason it's good at COVID-19 is that I have done it obviously without COVID-19, and the premise is that people are not going to answer the phone. they are doing so many things, like right now. So just to give you, I'll tell you my personal story. I have 3 children. My husband was like always on the road, and I was a working mom some of the time, and then a PTA president other parts of the time. So in my space, I rarely answered the phone, rarely, because I was always moving. I was either in the car with kids in the back and I wouldn't be able to hear anyone, or I was at home with kids around and I wouldn't be able to hear anyone, or I was by myself and I didn't want to hear anyone. So in all of those spaces, and I'm not saying that everyone is like that, but there's so much of that busyness that some people appreciate it, like I appreciate it, some don't, but a lot of that busyness has been shifted into a different space where we're actually at home more often and we have the time for a check-in phone call. Remember, this isn't an open call for telephone solicitation of new members. This is an invitation for you to establish a connection with the community that you are trying to build, who will ultimately be supporting that co-op, who ultimately may be on your board or may want to volunteer with you because they have this personal connection with you now. That's not the only reason to do it, but think about it that way. These are the people who ultimately are going to be alongside you as you bring this thing into a brick and mortar. There's no better time to call them because, I mean, until the world opens up, Georgia opened a little early, I will grant you that, but until the world opens up, there's so many fewer demands on our time, both socially as well as, you know, kind of leaving the office and having to go someplace every day. So I think. Mm-hmm.
Now, so you've got a couple of questions that are about, you know, what do you leave messages if people don't answer? Do you leave a callback number? And it sounds like it's getting into like the how-tos, which I think is your next section. So should we hold off on those?
Yeah, let's hold off on the how-tos. I want to make sure that I cover sort of the board concerns, because I think it's so important to get the understanding of what your questions may be related, or what you would perceive a hurdle to be related to your board buying into this or convening that group of people to make the calls.
So she's invited you to share what's your hurdle to buying into this idea of calling people. So if you have a hand, if you want to share your thought or question. Because I've heard it before. You guys, like, I've heard them. Okay, Kathy.
Oh, thanks for unmuting me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're, I don't know, stage 2A, between 2A and 2B, and we have 681 members. That's a lot of members to be thinking of calling. We did call the first 100 last year. We call them our pioneer members. They all joined at one time. And so that's 100 less. But if you have that many, which ones would you suggest that we call? The most recent 100 or the second 100? Have any idea?
Well, you know, it really depends on you and what your resources are. If you feel that you're limited, for example, this is what I'm hearing. If you're limited to making 100 phone calls, then you can stratify that any way that makes sense. You could say, well, these are the people that have mentioned an interest in volunteering. But when you think about the purpose of the call, it isn't following up on an interest that they've already suggested. It's actually an interest in reaching out to them and saying, how are you? So you could confine that for lots of reasons, but I would say, let's say that you just want to call 100 people. If you have 100 seniors and you want to focus on them, because what we know is that seniors at the beginning, and I think this still stands true today, the seniors at the beginning of COVID-19 felt the most insecure in terms of food insecurity, as well as their own health in that threat. And so a lot of the seniors, for example, in our community, were very concerned. They were frightened to leave home. They didn't know if they should have their grandchildren over, if the grandchildren could hug them, because we were being told in the media that seniors were especially vulnerable. And they already had the food vulnerability. If you think of a typical recipient of Meals on Wheels, or someone who's looking for ways to, kind of basically reduce their food expenses, that might be the person that you really want to reach out to and say, how are you doing? And so let me just flip this too. It also depends on what kind of resources you have on your list of resources. If a food subsidy is a resource that you have, you definitely call those people, because they may not know or realize that your co-op is a resource that may address a serious problem. And let me say one more thing about that. They may not tell you that they have a serious problem, and don't expect them to raise their hand and say, yes, I need help with food assistance. Our list combines everything in one list. And we just say, we have a list of some food resources that may be helpful to you. You've already targeted the group of people you think can use that. And now go back to that 100 and say, okay, here's a list that we've compiled. We also put it on our Facebook page. It's also going to be in our newsletter. But I just wanted to call, see how you're doing, make sure you've seen this, and is there anything else I can do?
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
The questions that come up, and I think this one's interesting. And I love what you just said about the list. When you talked to me about it, you were also saying you would have local farm delivery on the same list with subsidized groceries. So it just, we're not making any assumptions about what your needs are. I loved that. But we have some questions about, I think one of the things holding some of us back is, what if you get a request you can't fulfill, or what if someone's going through some really hard stuff?
Yeah. So, I think the most important thing about this, and we have it in our script too, is I actually have I think 15 that I'm going to share with you. I have about 15 phrases to keep in mind to just kind of demonstrate compassion. Sometimes I can be listening to someone on the phone and their pain just blows me away. The thing that's easy to say is, you want to say we're all struggling, but when you realize that someone is struggling beyond what you can even imagine, I was in a text conversation with a woman today, was actually Facebook, who said that she needed someone to drive her husband to chemo. She couldn't do it, and the normal, routes weren't available. And when you hear something like that, that's far from where you are, and also has something to do with this person who also needs food and also has young children living with them and can't leave home, you realize that you're not going to always have the answer, but you do have an ear, and you are there to listen, and where you can come up with some suggestions that are, because sometimes those problems are not food related. You ask someone how they're doing, it could be anything. Be able to hear that and say, let me see if I can think of something. Can I call you back? What's the best way to send you this information? And then you're not promising that you have an answer, but you're saying, let me just see. And then reach out and see if there's something that you can do, if it's a connection that you can make. That's a connection that the co-op may have the ability to make that an individual may not think of. So, you will probably have the answer to the food questions. You won't have the answer to the, how do I get my elderly husband to chemo question. Am I following you? Are there food questions or is it more the other questions when you ask someone how they're doing?
I think that's what people had here, and I think the rest of it, a lot of these questions are getting into, you know, is there a call number they call back? How do we collect this information we're getting and turn it into a usable format? So I'm gonna turn it back over to you to get into logistics, because I think that's where the questions are starting to go.
Okay, good. I'm glad that's where they're starting to go, because that is exactly where I should be able to pick up when I open this tab. So the key, let me just make sure that we understand each other. So the key is that you're on the phone, you're going to have a script. That script is going to have information that you're going to send with them as a follow-up. While you're on the phone, you do not have to name resources and things like that. You're really looking, scanning and knowing what you have in front of you to see if it's going to fit. But I don't think that you should feel compelled to read a link or give them a list that they have to write down, because that's so much harder. And the other reason that I say that is that I think that it makes it a little bit easier for everyone when you can send them that email and then get off the phone and, or, you know, ask them if there's anything else that you could possibly do to help them. So hold on, I'm trying to get on from here.
I'm going to let you focus on that for a second. And I'm just going to mention that actually Dorchester Food Co-op's doing this right now, actually as a preliminary to the fact that they're going to be doing an owner capital campaign in the fall. And I think it's excellent practice, because I don't know about you guys, I've done multiple capital campaigns, and at first, if you're not a natural like Kym, it doesn't necessarily go perfect, and you have to kind of learn how to do this thing in your style and get used to it. You're also getting owners used to being called by you, and the first time you're called, it's not to ask them for something, it's to say hi and how can we help. So, you know, even those of you who are further down the road, we haven't gotten that question, but I kind of expected it. You know, more from the question that angle Kathy had, which was like, oh, we've got 1,000 owners, how the heck would we do this? But more from the angle of, well, we're here. And like, well, I would say, and Kym, would you agree, it's not too late to do this at any point in the development. Even if your store's under construction, it's not too late to do this.
The reason it isn't too late to do this is because the mission of the cooperative is always going to be to engage and build that community around it. And so as you're, I mean, you could be a brick and mortar and do this, but you know, when you think about it, I was talking to a community co-op that has like 14,000 members. So, you know, at some point it just doesn't become necessary because you're seeing people. In this space where we are startups who are not seeing people necessarily on a regular basis, or may not know that we pass them in, you know, some grocery store on a regular basis, because we're not necessarily in our own space and seeing a member that is identifiable as a member. And so this outreach to me is specifically relevant to a startup, because you don't have the brick and mortar where you're waving at them as they come in the door and making them feel all welcome and hugged at a social distance appropriate hugging way. But that I think that the whole value of it is that you're building community. So if you have a brick and mortar, or if you have 1,000 members, it's still relevant to chop that list into something that's doable for your outreach committee. If it's not 1,000, it's okay. Just don't tell everybody, don't put it on Facebook that we'll be calling you, because you're calling a fraction of them. But, and I think you can, so can I share my screen now?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You should be able to go ahead and just it'll just let me know that you want to, and I'll say yes.
Okay, so do you see the second one of me that's just a picture?
Yep. I do.
So that's the one that will share the screen.
Okay. I'm waiting for the request. Okay.
Where's my share screen request? Is it in the top?
I think for those of you the share screen option is at the bottom, right? Is at the bottom? Yeah, it's at the bottom.
Let's see. Hold reactions, participants, chat, leave. Video settings.
Share screen.
See that. Okay. Well,
Is it going to do it, or did you find it?
I don't have a share screen request. I've shared my screen yesterday, and it was, oh, there it is. Now it's there. Okay.
Excellent. While we're getting this set up, Jess mentioned something interesting, Jessica Bunemeyer. If I could go back to the beginning, so those of you in stage 1, listen up. I would have collected birthdays when people became owners, because that actually would be very useful information during our capital campaign. So I know that could feel invasive, but birthdays can be a really fun way to connect to people, and that information could be useful later in another way. So it was interesting to see her mention that. What's going on right now? There. Okay. Got it? Yeah, we're seeing your screen. Yay.
Great. Let me just do this so that it's in slideshow. Oops.
And we've got about 15 minutes left.
Great.
So you got it? Okay.
Silenced.
We've got some questions coming in. I don't know if you can take them while you were trying to get set up, though.
Yes, I can take a question because I want to make sure that this is on slideshow.
Okay. So when having the phone conversations, would it be okay to feel people out members, potentially who might be interested in volunteering too, about getting involved?
It is. Here's the challenge with that. When you have a member who's interested in volunteering, you want to give them the opportunity to also tell you how they're doing. If they ask you, how can I help? That's fine. But I don't think it's a good idea to turn the conversation into a solicitation. So do you follow me there on why we're talking about it as two different things? Good. Now I'm trying to share my screen again.
One thing you will find that people, though, are looking for sometimes is just like, sometimes you're going to get on these calls and what they're looking for is conversation. What they're looking for is connection. There are some people who have become a lot busier or under much more stress. And then there's a lot of people who have actually become more isolated. So don't be afraid to have the list of volunteer opportunities with you. Just follow Kym's guideline with, don't go looking to put that out there. If that arises as a desire to connect with people in the co-op or to get more involved, be ready to answer that. So, all right, ready to go, Kym?
Yes, thank you. So as you're looking at this sort of the organizing and toolkit, we talked a little bit about that as being important. And the idea behind it is really just making sure that your board members, we talked about this too, making sure that your board members feel comfortable. So I'm making sure that I'm muted here. I think I am. Okay. So now we can talk about the 3 C's for members. So that we did the 3 P's. We'll go back and review, but we did them. Now we'll talk about the 3 C's for the members. The 3 C's being, we're focusing on community. We're focusing on what we are building and how they came to us in the beginning. So we are basically introducing everything about this call as reaching out about them, which goes back to the last question that I just answered. Yeah, they may ultimately in this conversation ask you, how can I help? How many members do we have? Shouldn't I be asking other people? In your packet for your outreach team, whether it's board members or others, you can have a member application or whatever you usually hand out at a tabling event as a digital copy, so that if they want to pass it along, it's there. And you can introduce that in your script as, I'm going to send you a few things that I think might be helpful to you, and then tell them what they are. We talked about this a little bit as well. Most of this call is listening. You're doing a little bit of talking, but it's primarily engaging in their questions, engaged in following the member's lead. So this big person over here is talking about all of her various problems. She's got the kids at home with her and she's trying to make sure they're engaged in a way that she or he may not have done before. I used women through this, I apologize, I just pulled them out. The other thing is that she's also trying to work from home. So many of our members who are also parents are also trying to figure out their budget and how all of this impacts how many dollars they're spending on food versus what they used to spend on food when the kids were in school or in daycare most of the day and everybody was out of the house, versus now when at least my kids are eating all day long. And I think when you recognize that and empathize with that, you're listening to that person explain why food is a priority for them. That's really what this is about. They want to have healthy snacks for their family or for themselves. People have referred to the amount of weight and the amount of snacking they do when they just are at home all day, and you know how not nutritious it is. And I think that's a really important thing. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going because I do want to have time at the end. I referenced these initially as well, these empathy phrases. I wanted to share them with you a little bit just so you can kind of see what they are, and I'll be happy to send them out to you. Of course, they're in the slides, so you can see them there too. There's something that I included in our member packet, our board members packet, because I wanted them to have them at hand. They're not specifically scripted. You use whichever phrase you feel is appropriate or maybe helpful or something that resonates with you. And after you use like maybe number 6 or number 4 or whichever once, you'll probably continue to use those and the rest of them won't be as meaningful to you. But I do find that sometimes when I'm just making a lot of calls that I feel like I like to have, you know, just a couple of things that I just know to say, that I know I can say, oh, that's a great suggestion. Let me like just float that by the board and see if we can do that. And, you know, look for it on our Facebook page, or yeah, I love that idea. And that's another way to do it. You know, I completely agree with you. These are all just affirming the community building that you've been doing in the first part of the call. So, aren't you glad I got the slides up? It took me longer to get the slides up than I did. Wait till you see the whole presentation, though. It's really cool. If I think right now, I would love to turn it over for additional questions, and then I think we're following up with Jacqueline's offer to send you the script and the other materials. So that won't be a question now, but anything else?
Well, there were a lot of logistics questions, so we'll come back to those now. So people are talking about like, so how do we collect all this information? So you said, you know, which information should we be collecting? Like you said, we'll get email and like we're getting to know them. Like, should we be writing stuff down? Where do we put it? Like, so talk about collecting information.
Okay, so I want to tell you how we're doing it, and then I'll tell you that that's a part of this, the packet that you give your board. For us, we're using a Google Doc, and it's a form that we have filled in with the member and their phone number, and then they can fill in things. We fill in with the email address that we have, but they, as part of the script, they're also saying, I'd like to email this to you, and I want to make sure that we have the best email for you. So think about how valuable that is. So, because people do, you know, they may give you the email that they never check or something like that, but now they realize you're giving them something they need, and all of a sudden you're going to get a better email. Then the other thing that so that's the Google form, and I'm pretty sure I could share it with you. If not that, I can just kind of, you know, make it generic because it's not really specific to Market 166. It's just a form that I created. The script I'll send you. It doesn't reference the form, but it does share with you. I mean, my form tracks the script. So where you're asking for some information, there's a way to check off the box member would like, and then it's sort of like food resources, member information, things like that. So you can actually check a box, and then because it's a Google form, we can track that and then say, oh, we sent 72 over 100 people wanted the food resources, but all 100 wanted the member resources.
Okay, excellent. We had some questions about, so do you leave messages with callback numbers if they're not there? How many times do you call someone for just pestering, that kind of stuff?
Yes, okay. So the first call, you don't get an answer, you do not leave a message. and then you wait at least an hour. My recommendation is you wait, like, let's say you are doing 5 calls a day. Wait until the end of the cycle and then call anyone that did not respond the first time. Now, if nobody responds, just stop and wait until you've called it a bad time for some reason. So my point is that you leave some time and then you do a second call. If you do not get an answer, there are 2 follow-ups. One is you leave a message, and I script out the message. The second, so I'll share with you that script. Remind me, Jacqueline. And then the second thing is you send a follow-up email to whatever email we have, and that email says, hey, you may have gotten a voicemail from me. This is Kym from Market 166, your food co-op. I'm just calling to check in. We have some food resources. You probably saw them in our newsletter, but just in case, I wanted to pass them along. And if there's anything else that we can do, feel free to give me a call back and leave my phone number. Why am I leaving my personal phone number? Because A, they didn't want to talk to me when I called them. They may not call me back, but if they do, there's nothing that I'm not prepared for. This is the same conversation that I would have had with them had I called them. They're just taking control of the timing. And you can even say, if it's better for you, because maybe you're working from home and have kids and have a lot of things that you're balancing, and there might be a better time for you, you can say, you can pretty much reach me anytime after 5. And if I don't answer, just let me know when is a good time to call you back. Just like you would if you were calling a friend. Don't feel the pressure, because this is, think of this as your next board president or your next person who's going to lead a committee, because they're already vested. And if they're calling you, they're even more vested. They want to know what you have to say.
That's one of the things that leads to a question. Some co-op organizers will tell you how valuable it is to make these calls, but folks who've tried it recently will say people don't answer numbers they don't know, period. So, is this still worth doing? How do you address that?
If they don't answer, if you call 100 people and they don't answer, you've spent about, maybe, let's say under my call twice, 100 minutes. Out of 100 people, you're gonna get some answers. I think that that's true only because people don't recognize the number, but then when they call you back, it becomes valuable because you get that call back. So I go back and forth on whether I answer a call. If it's during the day, I feel like it's more telemarketers, and now there are even spam alerts on my AT&T phone, so it'll say spam alert or something like that, or spam risk, something like that. And so your phone number is not going to come through as a spam risk. It's really just going to come through as a phone number. So the chances of them answering are not so remote. Plus, then you're sending them an email, so they might even just respond to that.
Yep, I would agree. It doesn't matter if you get a conversation or not. If you've left that voicemail and that email just saying we're calling out a concern and to share a resource, that was another one of those positive touches about the co-op. So they might answer next time. They might even put you in their phone as co-op, and then you're going to get funny calls later. So we got time for one more live question. Does anybody want to unmute and ask their question or share their thoughts and comments? You guys are all just quiet late in the day today.
Yeah. Well, I see Lois unmuted.
Did you have a question? Did you wanted to share, Lois?
No, I just we're starting a phone call campaign, so this is really, really helpful. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And the other thing I noticed that someone said, this call is about building a relationship and trust with the owner. That is 100% right. You want to be known as someone who follows through. So one of my talking point notes that I don't think I mentioned is that I ask the volunteer, as soon as you hang up the phone, as soon as you disconnect, send the email and use your notes from the call right there. And that's why we made it into a form, because it's really easy to just check the box of what you emailed them. It's really easy to change the email in real time. So if you do it right then, it's done. And that also establishes trust. There's nothing worse than telling them that you're going to send something and then you forget, or, life goes on. And so recognize how busy you are too, and just the idea of, as if you are the leader of this, make it as easy as possible. If you're not the leader and just making the phone calls, thank you for helping me make it as easy as possible.
And interesting, one of you decided to message me privately, but they said one of the resources they're considering putting on their list is actually like stuff you can get delivered for Father's Day. And I thought that was fun. Like, it can be fun stuff.
Oh,
like,
yeah, absolutely.
People are still trying to figure out how to do cool stuff for Father's Day, which farms are delivering, or which producers are delivering ground coffee or whatever. So that was cute. I think that, Kym, you've mentioned that, like, you can have some fun stuff on there, right?
Yeah, delivery has become all the rage now. I mean, I've had coffee delivered and then fresh bread. I'm all about the delivery. And I've always been, though, just because it makes it easier. But I want to say something else along those lines. I reference in the script that they should be sure to follow you on Facebook, because you're not going to send them a new list or phone them every month with new information. This is just, and you don't even want to lead them to believe that this is an ongoing phone conversation. So just putting that out there, because I think I can't read the Zoom group chat as well as I can just look at your faces, but I think that the whole idea of this is it is a unique time. You may do it more than once in the lifetime of your co-op, but it is not a regular occurrence. And I don't want you to feel like I've got the burden of organizing the next time or the next 100. You really, there's no burden. It's really a nice way to establish the community until you have a way of seeing them in person again at your food co-op picnic or something like that.
All right, well, guys, timing wise, I'm going to go ahead and get us a little wrapped up here. Thank you so much to Kym. This was awesome. I don't know if anyone else just found this so centering. I have not done that kind of fundraising nonprofit work, so it's like a different lens, and it's so helpful. So appreciation to Kym. I wanted to let you know that I will send the recording and the slides out. And Kym, I have a list of things, so it may take me till tomorrow because Kym's got to find this whole list of things to send me. But I'll email you when I have all the resources, and you guys will get that. Yes, these are starting to go up on YouTube, and you will get the YouTube links for that. I just want to make sure you know what's coming up. Tomorrow, we've got succession planning now with Mad River Market. This is the time, people. A lot of boards have not really done all their homework, not just on who would take over if the board chair was suddenly very ill or whatever, but where would we find all the resources? Where is this piece of information, or do we all have access to this document? Mad River is going to talk us through how they figured out everything that needed to be shared and how they've gone about that to really be prepared if anything were to happen to a board member. And it's especially important during this time of COVID-19. And then we've got Don Moffitt back from Columinate, and it's called Predicting the Future, Really. This one's super aimed at those of you who are 2B and stage 3, kind of like, well, now what? How are we going to readjust our predictions about our feasibility, our viability as a business? What can we predict? What can't we? And Don's going to be honest about what we can't know and what we can know, and how to estimate things. So it'll be great to have him here. And then there was so popular, our Outreach Confidential. We will be offering it again, Outreach Confidential #2, but we are changing it a little, which is we are maxing it 15 people because we want everyone who comes to really be able to participate because it's a peer discussion. So please, the registration just went up. I haven't put it out yet. I will be putting it on Facebook tonight, the actual event, and they'll have the link to the registration. You're going to want to get registered early if you're planning to come. And the topic this week is going to be long distance volunteer onboarding and utilization. How do we do this when we can't see them in person? How do we actually bring in new volunteers? What could they be doing? So it's going to be a good conversation about that for those of you who are leads on outreach. All right. Thanks again to Kym. This was terrific. And everybody have a great day.